31st meeting of the Environmental Resources Committee to order. We will begin with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item 3, public comment, 15-minute limit. Staff, do we have anybody signed up? Nope, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, January 3rd, 2023, January 6th, 2023, and January 21st, 2023 committee minutes. Motion by Drebeck, second by Overbeck to approve. Any discussion? I did have one note. Supervisor Marash emailed me and said that she attended the January 3rd meeting, so add Supervisor Marash to others present. That would be the only clarification. So without objection to that, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, or resolution. A, public hearings, review possible actions and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration. Town zoning changes. 1, Lori A. Boots, trustee on behalf of Magdalene Conrad Trust, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of Elderon. 2, Jordan Weaver, Rural Estate to Rural Residential, and from Rural Estate to Neighborhood Commercial, Town of Hull. And 3rd, the public hearing on text amendment changes to the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 15, Private Sewage System, Chapter 17, Zoning Code, and Chapter 18, Land Division and Survey Regulations. I'd like to begin by reminding everyone to please mute your electronic devices. The Marathon County ERC is now meeting a public hearing on the location, plan, specifications, and purposes of the projects previously listed. Members of the committee would be myself, Supervisor Jake Langenhan, Supervisor Al Drebeck, Vice Chair, Supervisor Seepelt, Supervisor Overbeck, Supervisor Ritter, Supervisor Vensky, Supervisor Stravinsky, Supervisor Unger, Marilyn Ben, our Wisconsin Towns and Villages Association rep, and Roddy Roskoff, our Farm Service Agency representative. Also staff, Lori Miskimins, our Conservation Planning and Zoning Director, Kirsty Heidenreich, our County Conservationist, Shad Harvey, Land Resource Manager, Nicole Delaney, our Administrative Coordinator, Garrett Poggle, Land Use Technician, and Teal Fikes, Land Use Specialist. The establishment of the ERC is required by laws for purposes of administration of county ordinances and land conservation programs. This committee must follow state laws and local ordinances as written. This committee cannot change or ignore any part of the ordinances or state laws, so must apply the laws as written. The purpose of this committee is to hear and decide on proposed ordinances and ordinance revisions, rezoning petitions, and provide direction on land conservation planning programs. The ERC will give a full and fair hearing to any person applying for a rezone petition. A taped recording is being made of the meeting, which will assist with preparation of written hearing minutes. The committee is interested in hearing all pertinent comments and questions. Each hearing will be open by reading the public notice and allowing staff to present a staff report, including evidence from any on-site inspection. The applicant and anyone wishing to testify will be sworn in and allowed to give testimony. Witnesses will be called in the order of those first in favor, second opposed, then third as interest may appear. The committee may ask questions of the zoning staff and applicant. It is necessary that we set a reasonable time limit on individual statements and on the overall length of the hearing. To promote orderly discussion, anyone wishing to present oral testimony or ask questions relating to the hearing should state your name and present your testimony or questions so it becomes part of the official record. We request you avoid repetition. Once the committee has all the necessary facts, the chairman will close the hearing, allowing no further testimony, and the committee will deliberate and decide in front of the public whether the applicant has met the standards in the ordinance. No additional testimony from the public is allowed during the deliberation. However, the committee may question staff for purposes of clarification. After a decision is made, the committee will proceed to the next hearing. Many of the decisions made by the committee are a recommendation to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, who will take up the matter at a future county board meeting. Please contact staff for more information regarding this county board process. The committee will now hear the application of 5A1, Lori A. Boots on behalf of Magdalene Conrad Trust, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of Elderon. And we will begin with our staff report, which we have Garrett for. Garrett, I'll swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, this is a petition for Lori A. Boots on behalf of the Magdalene Conrad Trust. Petition to rezone land, staff report, January 31st, 2023 for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Lori A. Boots, trustee for the Magdalene Conrad Trust. located at 157489 Kiwanis Road, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54403. The property owners are the Magdalene Conrad Trust, located at 179476 County Road II in Eland, Wisconsin, 54427. The area proposed to be rezoned is located just east of the corner of Red Hickory Road and County Road II. The petition of Lori A. Boots, trustee, on behalf of Magdalene Conrad Trust to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from general agriculture to rural estate located in the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 8, Township 27 North, Range 10 East, in the town of Elderon. The area proposed to be rezoned is described as Lot 1 of preliminary CSM. Parent parcel number 022-2710-081-0994. The Town of Elderon Town Board met on January 3rd, 2023. Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, January 31st, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. The existing zoning district is general agriculture. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown as agriculture and residential in Town of Elderon's comprehensive plan, updated from 2021, shown in their existing land use map. Adjacent land uses are comprised of woodlands, open land, agriculture, and residential. The proposed zoning district is rural estate. The future land use map from the Town of Elderon from their 2021 plan shows the proposed area to be rezoned is shown as residential and agriculture in the town's comprehensive future land use map. Adjacent land uses are comprised of residential, woodlands, and agriculture. The Town of Elderon does not participate in the Farmland Preservation Program. This is the aerial photo of the property. This is a certified survey map showing Lot 1, the area to be rezoned. On January 3rd, 2023, the Town of Elderon Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff comments regarding ERC conclusions of law. The rezoning is substantially consistent with the following plans. Note how the proposal relates to the future land use plan and the vision, goals, objectives, and policies of the plan. Marathon County Comprehensive Plan, Town Comprehensive Plan, and Marathon County Farmland Preservation Plan. Marathon County Comprehensive Plan relies on the Town Comprehensive Plan regarding specific land uses and zoning districts for individual parcels. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown to be designated as residential and agriculture in the town's future land use map. CPZ staff rely on the towns to make these recommendations, given the town board members and residents know their town and true purpose and intent of the plan. The area in question was not designated as a farmland preservation area. The Town of Elderon does not participate in farmland preservation zoning. As indicated by the town's future land use map and resolution recommendation, it appears the rezone is consistent with the purpose and intent of the comprehensive plan. The location of the proposed development minimizes the amount of agricultural land converted and will not substantially impair or limit current or future agricultural use or of other protected farmland. No farmland will be consumed. The applicant has demonstrated that there is a need for the proposed development. Adequate public facilities are present or will be provided. No impacts on road, water, sewage, drainage, schools, emergency services, etc. Providing public facilities will not be an unreasonable burden to the local government. The need is for a proposed land division. All necessary public facilities are anticipated to be provided, if not already provided, given any proposed development would rely on private systems such as a private well and sanitary system if applicable. No anticipated burden on local government. All applicable building, construction, and use standards will be applied during the zoning and building permit review process. The rezoning will not cause unreasonable air and water pollution, soil erosion, or adverse effects on rare or irreplaceable natural areas. All federal, state, and local permits and approvals are required for any applicable development on site. Additionally, the proposed rezone will likely not result in any unreasonable air and water pollution, as all pertinent regulations apply and will need to be adhered to. Any disturbance greater than 1 acre would need a DNR stormwater management permit. The town has approved the proposed rezone of the property. The Town of Elderon Town Board has recommended approval of this rezone petition. All concerns from other agencies on the proposed rezone have been addressed. DNR, Highway, DOT. What are those concerns? The county was not made aware of any concerns from other agencies. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors.
Okay, any questions for Garrett? Supervisor Seefeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That second driveway that goes up behind the old home, is there an easement for that driveway to get back to that barn that's back there that's going to be sold separate? Do you know of?
No, I don't know of any easement, but by the looks of the CSM, there would still be access through the field. So they would still have access to the public road, the County Road II.
Because that is now, going into the 5-acre rural estate. I'm just wondering, because I know the situation, it's in my township. The person that's buying the house is not buying the barn that's behind it. That is a separate family that is going to be buying it. And I just have a little concern if there is an easement to get back to that barn.
So with our land division ordinance, all that requires is access to the property. So with the 5 acres, I do not believe that they're cutting completely off any access to the public road. So through that field would be on that southwest corner. They would still have access from the public road to go up and around to get to that barn. Okay. Is it the most convenient thing for that barn? Obviously not, being with the driveway there, but there is access to that barn.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Garrett. We'll move on to public testimony. I'd ask that anybody that wishes to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, please either unmute yourself joining us online or come forward at this time to speak into the microphone at the back of the room. And state your name and address. So I'll call again. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. All right. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request? And again, we are on item 5A1. Please identify yourself at this time. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request? 5A1, please identify yourself at this time. I'll call one more time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request? Please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak as interested in the proposed rezone request? 5A1, please identify yourself at this time. I'll call one more time. Anybody wishing to speak as interested in the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. If no one else wishes to testify,
this is Ray. This is Rayanne Brandt, and of course I'm proposing that it get passed, and I do believe.
if you'd like to offer testimony, I would have to swear you in. It'll just take you saying your name and address, and then me swearing you in. It'll be very quick. So could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure, Rayanne Brandt, and it's 7640 W North Drive in Saxon, Wisconsin.
Thank you. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Without any objection, I'm going to presume that was a yes. So continue forth with.
That's yep.
Okay, continue forth with any testimony you wish to add.
Well, I'm just hoping that it does pass, and I do believe that there is an easement on that driveway going back to the barn in the back.
Okay. Thank you for adding that information. Does the committee have any questions? Okay. So, seeing and hearing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Oh, and then, okay, yep, sorry, different thing. All right, so I'll call one more time. Anybody that wishes to speak for this proposed rezone request, just identify yourself at this time. 5A1, in favor, against, is interested. Okay, seeing that nobody else wishes to testify for this application, I'm now declaring the public hearing on 5A1 Lori A. Boots on behalf of Magdalene Conrad Trust, General Agriculture to Rural Estate, Town of Elderon, closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application and apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. I believe a motion to approve would be in order. Supervisor Seefeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion for the petition of Lorraine A. Boots, trustee on behalf of Magdalene Conrad Trust to amend the General Code of Ordinance for the Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone from general ag to RE rural estate in the town of Elderon, and to pass the conclusions of law and forward it to the county board.
Second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Move on to 5A2, Jordan Weaver, Rural Estates, Rural Residential, and from Rural Estate to Neighborhood Commercial, Town of Hall. Back to Garrett.
All right, this is the petition for Jordan Weaver, petition to rezone land, staff report January 31st, 2023, from the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Jordan Weaver, residing at 226-390 Silver Maple Lane, Colby, Wisconsin, 54421. The property owners are Jordan and Elaine Weaver, residing at the above address. The area proposed to be rezoned is located on the east side of County Road F between Elderberry Road and Huckleberry Road. The petition of Jordan Weaver to amend the General Code of Ordinance for the Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from rural estate to rural residential and from rural estate to neighborhood commercial, location described as part of the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 12. Got the township there. Range 2 East, Town of Hall. The area proposed to be rezoned is described as Lot 1 and Lot 2 of the preliminary CSM, parent parcel number 044-2802-122-0995. The Town of Hall Town Board met on January 20th, 2023. Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, January 31st, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the adjacent subject property. The existing zoning district is rural estate. The Town of Hall's comprehensive plan from 2005 shows their generalized land use map, and the proposed area to be rezoned is shown as croplands, single-family residential. Adjacent land uses are comprised of croplands. Proposed zoning district for Lot 1 is rural residential. The proposed zoning district for Lot 2 is neighborhood commercial. The purpose of neighborhood commercial district is to accommodate the wide range of retail stores and personal service establishments which cater to frequent recurring needs. The future land use map for the Town of Hall from their 2005 plan shows the area to be rezoned as cropland and single-family residential. Adjacent land uses are comprised of cropland and single residential. Town of Hall does participate in farmland preservation. Here's an aerial photo showing the property. Here's the CSM. On January 20th, 2023, the Town of Hall Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Number 1, the Marathon County Comprehensive Plan relies on the Town Comprehensive Plan regarding specific land uses and zoning district for individual parcels. The area proposed to be rezoned is shown to be designated as cropland and single-family residential in the town's future land use map. The CPZ staff rely on the towns to make these recommendations, given the town board members and residents know their town and the true purpose and intent of the plan. The area in question was not designated as a farmland preservation area. As indicated by the town's future land use map and resolution recommendation, it appears the rezone is consistent with the purpose and intent of the comprehensive plan. Number 2, no farmland will be consumed. Number 3, A, the need is for a proposed land division to accommodate the creation of a diesel repair shop. 3B, all necessary public facilities are anticipated to be provided, if not already provided, given any proposed development would rely on private systems such as private well and sanitary system. 3C, no anticipated burden on local government. All applicable building, construction, and use standards will be applied during the zoning and building permit review process. Number 4, all federal, state, and local permits and approvals are required for any applicable development on site. Additionally, the proposed rezone will likely not result in any unreasonable air and water pollution, as all pertinent regulations apply and will need to be adhered to. Any disturbance greater than 1 acre will need a DNR stormwater management permit. Number 5, the Town of Hull Town Board has recommended approval for this rezone petition. Number 6, the county was not made aware of any concerns from other agencies. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town's resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Any questions for Garrett? Supervisor Overbeck?
Just have a question. It says the area proposed to be rezoned.
Give him a mic, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
just have a question on, it says the area proposed to be rezoned is shown to be designated as cropland and single-family residential in the town's future land use plan, yet then it goes down below and says diesel repair shop. That's significantly different than what the town has designated it for.
I can respond. I can respond to that one. I think I may have to be sworn in though.
You're correct. Yeah, Shad, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
So we rely a lot on the town's response for that. Their comprehensive plan, yes, does say agriculture or residential, but it is something that we leave to the towns to, I guess, look at their plan and make sure that these are abiding by their plan. If they feel it won't be an impact on their overall comprehensive plan, we take their input very seriously, and if they see it not being an issue with their comprehensive plan, that's what we report to you guys.
And my understanding, based on the facts in the report, is that the plan was adopted in 2005.
That's correct.
So, well, I'll save that part for discussion, but are there any more questions for staff at this time? Supervisor Overbeck.
Just as a follow-up, then we should probably change the statement as indicated by the town's future land use map and resolution/recommendation. It appears the rezone is consistent because they're making a change to what they had in their land use plan. I would assume that we want to make notation of that.
That can definitely be addressed. That the recommendation should be the thing that's illustrated there versus the comp plan indicating it. So we definitely can do that.
Okay. Supervisor Draybeck.
Thank you. Isn't on question 8 here, is cropland being consumed by the zone change? And it says no. Do I have that? It's on page, what is?
That's the one with the pictures, right? Or, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no pictures, but.
Well, the pictures of the form, I think it's 37.
Correct.
30,
Yeah,
37,
37,
question 8, yeah.
So I think what's the cropland, this parcel's predominantly was used for residential purposes. I do believe that somebody, it does appear by the aerial as well, that somebody did row crop part of it, but that wasn't the predominant use of the parcel.
I'll make one comment that that's of course based on the town's report as far as the facts that are presented to our staff too. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, staff. Moving on to anybody wishing to speak in favor of the request. So again, we're on 5A2 for Jordan Weaver. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of 5A2, please unmute yourself if you're joining us electronically, or approach the microphone at the back of the room at this time. Do we have anyone joining us online for that one that matches the name on the agenda? No?
I do
Okay.
not believe so.
Okay, well, we'll call again and see if anybody unmutes. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request 5A2 for Jordan Weaver, rural estate to rural residential and rural estate to neighborhood commercial, Town of Hall, please unmute yourself if you're joining us electronically, or approach the microphone at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request for 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. One more time. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Moving on to anybody as interested. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for the proposed rezone request, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak as interested in the proposed rezone request for 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. We're getting some feedback noise. I would just ask the members of the public joining us electronically that if you're not testifying, please mute yourself to avoid that background noise, please. If you do wish to testify, I will call one last time. Please identify yourself at this time. All right. If no one else wishes to testify for this application, I am now declaring the public hearing on item 5A2, Jordan Weaver, rural estate to rural residential and rural estate to neighborhood commercial, Town of Hall, now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application, apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. And I did want to make a comment based on Supervisor Overbeck's questions earlier. One of the frustrations that I have, and it's not reflective of this application necessarily, but it's when we receive, or it's not a reflection of the merits of the rezone in front of us, but when we get applications from towns, and the last time their plans were updated was 18 years ago. Things change in 18 years, right? So to staff's point, when they report on items like this and they see that there's approval, the idea, I think, is that, yes, if they are recommending approval, they know their town best. Even if they haven't updated their comp plan, the expectation is that if they want something like this to be approved, that they update their comp plan so that the future land use is reflected in it. So one of the frustrations that this committee has had, or at least I would like to say that I've inferred over the past couple of years, because we've had situations where the future land use maps don't reflect what you're seeing in the application because of that time lag. And if it was updated to where the town was at that time, theoretically, it would match. But because it wasn't updated in 18 years, that's why we're at right now. So Supervisor, we'll go with Supervisor Overbeck and then Supervisor Shafinsky. Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess with that, though, we're in a public hearing that we should state it correctly, because even with the staff recommendation to the county board, it also states that same thing, that the comprehensive plan, that in fact is the comprehensive plan that's in place. So I think staff's got to, in their recommendations, if it's in conflict with that, it can state that, but then say it's in the town's best interest, just for the record, because otherwise you're taking, in a public hearing, you're taking assumptions, which I don't think are a good thing.
My only, and that's a very good point. The only thing I'll add to that, and I think it's been noted in the past, but I don't see it on page 42. I thought that when we've had situations like this in the past where they've had the staff recommendations, we've mentioned that like staff would note that the town should update their comp plan so that it is consistent. And to Supervisor Overbeck's point, or credit, that is missing with that. So I guess if the report were updated to include that, would that be sufficient?
I think some note
Okay.
should be added, because otherwise it's a fact. I mean, it's a statement that it's consistent with the rezone.
Yep. And I mean, part.
The comprehensive plan, which is not correct. It is not.
And part of that, I think, to Shad's point earlier, is that if that is their idea that it's going to be the future use of that land, then you have to trust the town, because ultimately, the town's going to have to defend this decision if it's ever challenged. Corp Counsel, I'm correct there, right? If it's ever challenged, the town is ultimately going to have to defend this, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a lawyer yes, not
Oh, sure.
not 100% yes.
Yeah. But I think the idea is that, there's this expectation that the comp plan is, land use decisions should be consistent with that future land use plan. And I think if, for example, a town was to get challenged in court over a decision like that, the person challenging it could hold up that comp plan and say, well, wait a minute, this isn't consistent. So, Supervisor Shafinsky.
Okay, so I guess a couple questions.
I'm not a lawyer, by the way. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
I guess, what are the options that we have for action, partly with respect to the landowner? We don't necessarily want to hold up his approval and his project based on the fact that the town hasn't updated their documentation and their land use plan in the last 18 years. But we also need to find a way to, shall we say, encourage the town to update that. Either the plan to, at a minimum, to reflect this approval, or at best, to actually update their plan comprehensively so that it's brought forward from its, its position where it was 18 years ago to, something that's current in 2023.
So I think, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think statute says that a town's comprehensive plan has to be updated every 10 years. That's what I thought the
That's correct, yep.
Okay. So there is already expectation in statute that they do the update, but as far as any sort of penalty, I have no idea what that looks like. See that? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess the only thing I would add is that it can be very cost, prohibitive for towns. They usually have to plan to do these updates, often over a couple years of a budget cycle. They work with our regional planning organization to do that, but they do have to budget usually to get that done. So it's not something they can make happen overnight, but we're certainly working with as many towns as we can to get those plans updated and making those recommendations to get the plans updated. So.
Okay, and that's why I was very careful in my wording of encourage, because it's, we're not trying to penalize somebody, but they have a issue and they need to ultimately resolve it. And whatever we do report to the board does need to reflect the reality of what they actually have versus what they've approved.
And this isn't the first time that this has happened. Although I'll just highlight, though, is that while there might not be an express penalty in statute for the town, there's risk because, again, if we're ever challenged, that would be really tough to again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume that it would be very hard to defend an 18-year plan, especially when the expectation is that it gets updated every 10 years. Supervisor Olbrich.
Could we ask the town to, when they make the recommendation, to review their comprehensive plan and then state within the recommendation to us that it's an exception to that plan and they approve that, rather than us saying all of the conditions have been met and all of this, they're not meeting those conditions. So we have a responsibility to look at that. But if the town states that it's in their best interest to make that change and allow this zoning. Otherwise, I guess, have they really reviewed their comprehensive plan and looked at this change?
So
I'm not sure.
So item 10 of the application, or question 10 of the application, which is on 37, and this is, ever since we've used this form, I believe this has been on here. Is the proposed rezone request consistent with the town's adopted comprehensive plan? Explain. They've checked yes. And like I said, this is another sort of issue that's definitely tangentially related to this particular application. I get that. I understand that. We've run into issues like this in the past. Does
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, go ahead,
Jeff
Jeff.
Pritchard here.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead,
I
John.
don't know if you want to swear me in or what, but
No,
I need to.
I'm going to presume that you're offering a clarifying remark here. So if you want to add something, go ahead. And we're outside of the.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this particular case, I agree that the town should further explain their reasoning behind item number 10. You are correct that if it is not in compliance with their future land use map, that they should make a recommendation that they intend to update their comprehensive plan to reflect that. And towns are very difficult in terms of having an interest to update their comprehensive plans. One, due to staffing conditions, time, financial conditions, et cetera, and not having a lot of development pressure. Now, you are correct in the standpoint that in the state statutes, it is recommended that they update their comprehensive plans once every 10 years. However, what's not stated in state statutes is a penalty for not doing so, and the existing comprehensive plan, whatever year it may be approved, because these vary, do not sunset until they adopt a new comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to throw that input.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions or any other discussion from the committee? Supervisor Seefeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we pass this as it is written now without any changes, but if we make changes, are we allowed to make changes in here, or does the town have to do that?
The town would have to update their comp plan, but the idea is that whenever they would, like I said, when this has happened in the past, the idea is that we understand that the future land use of the community is this. It's different than what's in that plan. You're saying that's consistent with that future land use, what the plan is, but it's not reflected in that plan as of yet. So the idea is that if it's or if the rezone is approved, that afterwards that they would go back and they would update their comprehensive plan to include that information. That was past practice. So to get to your question, ultimately it does go back to the town. The town has to make that change.
In my opinion, I am not comfortable with approving this rezone. Right now, the way it's read in here, I mean, do we have the authority to change that, or do we have to go back to the town and let them change it? That's part of my question.
Authority to change the comp plan, or you mean, their response?
The wording in here
Yeah.
isn't
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The wording in here isn't right.
In their,
The town,
that
mean-
they didn't comment on it, you mean? Okay.
right, are we, if we pass this as the way the wording is now, and then somebody in the town hall said, well, wait a minute, this isn't right, are we going to get in trouble? Maybe that's an answer for the gentleman sitting over there.
Go ahead, Corp Counsel.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the ERC today is approving or denying the rezone, and you're looking at those conclusions of law and determining, okay, are these each of these standards met? Do we agree with that? The one that's applicable to this part of the discussion, I think, is the first one, which says the rezoning is substantially consistent with the following plans. It lists the Marathon County Comprehensive Plan, the Town Comprehensive Plan, and the Marathon County Farmland Preservation Plan. In your findings of fact, I think it would be fair for you to find that the rezoning is substantially consistent with the Town Comprehensive Plan because the town says that it's consistent with their plan. You're not finding that their plan says something or something else. You're finding that the town already approved this. So in that manner, your findings of facts are based on what the town already determined. And as Garrett and Shad have already said, since they're closer to this, they're in a better position to interpret their own plan. Did that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Supervisor Overbeck.
I guess I can't agree with that because it says, we're adopting the statement that this is in with the intent of the town's comprehensive plan, yet it's stated that it's cropland and single family, and the proposed use is not. So I guess without staff recommendations changing to take that wording out, I don't know how we can send this on to the county board and state that it's totally in line with the town's comprehensive plan, which it is not.
My understanding of Corporation Council's point is that if the town says it's consistent, then our interpretation of that is that it is consistent.
Yes, and what you as a committee are doing today is you would be adopting your own findings of fact, and you're basing that on what the town has provided you. You don't necessarily have to find today that the rezone creates a new zoning that's consistent with what's listed in the comprehensive plan, but that it's the wording here is substantially consistent with their plan. So the town has said, yeah, it is. You can legally rely on that to make your decision.
Do you believe Corp Council would be appropriate then that staff report be changed to include something about them updating the comp plan?
I think that's also something you could do is as a part of approving, you're approving it based on amending the staff comments to note that the town's comprehensive plan is not currently reflective of this zoning change. I think you could do that.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't force the town to do anything, but
No.
it I think addresses some of the concerns that I've heard.
Mr. Chairman, this is Marilyn Band.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Look at the word intent of the town's comprehensive plan. That's their intent. I think you're getting too complex on the wording. What is the intent? Yes, they need to update it, consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan. So we're playing on words.
And that's why we have attorneys. But the last thing I'll just note, well, you know what, that's not directly related to this, so I won't. But I understand Supervisor Overbeck's dilemma where you're looking at the information, you're looking at the rezone, and they don't seem level with each other. I think that though, with the task that's in front of us today, that relying on the town's recommendation or their findings is ultimately what we have to use when we make our determination. So I would believe a motion to approve is in order. I'll throw that out for discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Drabek.
I would also agree that a motion to approve would be in order. I
Care to
would,
make that motion?
I guess, I think that we've passed enough of these that haven't just been all up to date, so we already set a precedence that we don't do that all the time. So I think just having the motion as the motion without adding all the extra stuff in there. And if staff would want to recommend, just send them an extra recommendation, that'd be great.
That's fair. And I think the other thing I was going to add is that, like I said, I thought in past staff reports we included that note with the expectation that they update their comp plan. I thought we did.
I think you're right, yeah.
So I think as part of the approval to what Corporation Council was saying earlier, if staff provides that note, then I think that's the best that this committee can do, given the information in front of us. So, yeah. Supervisor Draybeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion then to approve the rezone of Jordan Weaver from rural estate to rural residential and from rural estate to neighborhood commercial in the town of Hull, based on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Shafinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Motion carries, was not unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to 5A3, Shad Harvey on behalf of Conservation Planning and Zoning, text amendment changes to the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapter 15, Private Sewage System, Chapter 17 Zoning Code, and Chapter 18 Land Division and Survey Regulations. Shad, you're still sworn in, so you should be good to go.
All right, so this is the petition of myself, Shad Harvey, on behalf of CPZ to amend the Marathon County General Code of Ordinance, Chapter 15, 17, and 18. I'm just going to reference here the memo that was in your guys' packet, kind of outlining the several opportunities that have been provided to give input on the proposed changes, and we'll just go through them briefly. October 6, 2022, the memo was sent out to towns notifying them of potential updates and the request for comments and offering to come to town meetings to provide an overview of the proposed changes. November 1st, 2022, public meetings with the ERC for additional discussion on the proposed updates. November 29th, public meeting with ERC to continue the discussions. December 28th, 2022, second memo was sent to the towns notifying them of the updates, scheduled an open house, and opportunities for them to submit questions or comments. January 6th, 2023, public meeting at ERC to continue the discussions on the proposed updates. And then January 19th, 2023, we held an open house for anybody to come in and ask or submit comments, questions. So the ultimate goal is today is to have ERC recommend approval based on the staff recommendations and town inputs at this meeting. We'll go through the proposed changes that we've been talking about for around the last 4 months. I just wanted to run through them quick just so we can go over the final recommendations for change. We'll start off with, again, just the general spelling, grammar, formatting, grammatical errors, state code references that just need to be updated. Those can be found in the draft ordinance. Amendment 2, the removal of the conditional use process for accessory buildings exceeding the dimensional limitations of Table 6 for personal or private use or accessory to principal use of the lot. We were proposing to pair this with an increase in the dimensional standards for the residential structures in Table 6. This conditional use, this process, we're removing it is because it's actually a area variance, and we already have a process in our code for this. Amendment 3, include net dwelling densities back into our schedule of regulations, add clarity regarding how net dwelling densities are calculated and what it's applicable to, such as subdivision, multifamily developments, conservation developments. State statute 66.10012H states that counties regulate densities. It's referenced multiple times in our current code as a key factor in regulating things like multifamily dwellings and conservation development. Without densities included, regulating those dwelling units and multifamily dwellings and conservation developments isn't possible. Amendment 4, include additional requirements for events with 500 guests or more in our temporary event permitting, such as a traffic control plan or emergency management plan. And just to give a good reason as to why we're proposing that, currently the code states the event shall be designed in a manner which minimizes the potential effect on adjacent properties and or conflicting land uses, but it doesn't give us any tools to accomplish that goal. Amendment number 5 would be removal of the major home occupation conditional use permit exemption for businesses that primarily conduct service off-site. This is to better protect the integrity of a zoning district and the interest of the public by requiring them, all new major home occupations, to go through the conditional use permit process. Amendment 6, and this one also, we'll go through it, but this one also ties into the amendments made to Chapter 15 and 18. But it would be to include a new subsection requiring a review of sale or exchange documents for parcels under 10 acres to ensure it abides by zoning district standards and POUT standards. Update to Chapter 15 and 18 so they remain consistent. Wisconsin State Statute 236.45 removed our authority in our land division code, which is section or Chapter 18, to require a CSM for sale or exchanges that are less than 5 acres when there's not a new lot created. So not having that process prevents the county from ensuring the newly adjusted parcels are conforming to the size requirements and standards of the respective zoning districts, as well as ensuring the legal sanitary system remains possible. The addition of this section would allow the county to prevent non-conforming parcels from being created in our county-owned towns. And tying that into Chapter 15, which is our private sewage systems ordinance, we'd be adding a subsection in powers and duties to include review of sale or exchange documents. And again, this is to make sure there's consistency above among our codes, and to ensure that the sale or exchange of the property doesn't affect that property from its ability to have a legal sanitary system. And getting into our Chapter 18 land division, we'd be adding a subsection to reference Chapters 15 and 17 for the purpose of requiring review for sale or exchange documents, and then updating the code to ensure the code is following state statute. And this again is to ensure consistency among the codes, essentially taking what was once allowed in Chapter 18 and referencing it to the other codes. So when individuals go and look for the requirements of a sale or exchange, it directs them to 15 and 17 so they can make sure they're abiding by all of the requirements. And again, if the goal of today would be to recommend these changes to the Board of Supervisors, and then the ultimate goal is in the beginning of March, which is our busy season, to have this adopted and ready to start using during our busy season.
All right, that was a staff report. Any questions for Shad? Supervisor Ribbick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering on the special events thing, wasn't there a committee or like a task force that was started for that, and that hasn't been done yet, or it has been, or I don't know?
So I believe there was something similar starting. This would be more for temporary events. I believe Mike might be able to address, or Corp Counsel might be able to address that.
So now I have to swear you in. Okay. Do you, sir, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
The county has a special events ordinance in its general code of ordinances that's separate from this. This is a specific zoning ordinance for temporary events. So the there hasn't been any progress in changing the county's special events ordinance. I would imagine that that task force or subgroup or committee, whatever you want to call it, could have some recommendations that might be relevant to this as well. I think these changes are kind of being recommended because right now the existing ordinance in the zoning code is really not usable or workable at all.
And I would just add, I think, yeah, Administrator Leonard did
I
email.
don't think you were sworn in either, Lori, so do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Administrator Leonard did email you all about that task force, and I think Corporation Counsel has advised us, depending on what comes out of that, we may have to update our code again. But for now, since that hasn't gotten, like Mike was saying, since that's still underway, this is something we're doing in the meantime, so.
Okay. Supervisor Overbeck.
Would this create any confusion though if there's, for county zoned zoning versus the general ordinance? Is that going to create any confusion between the two on what you fall under? Because you're going to have two regulations if you're in a county zoned property.
So currently, as the proposed code is written, it does reference the county ordinance as well. So currently it states that if you are over a certain number, that 500, you may need to abide by the standards of the county's ordinance. The additional ordinance that the task force would be for. So just to clarify a few things, this general code of ordinance this particular one would be only for county-zoned towns. The ordinance that the task force is for, that would be countywide.
That makes sense.
And
Go ahead, Corp Counsel. Or Chad, did you have anything else for that point?
nope, that's
Okay, go ahead.
A couple, I guess, additional items. The existing special events ordinance, that's the county-wide ordinance that currently exists, there are a few issues with it. Number one is it's likely not enforceable as currently written. Well, that's the biggest issue with it. It's not enforceable as currently written. So there has to be changes made to that ordinance. In the meantime, without these changes, there really are no tools to regulate. I don't think this creates an inherent conflict with the existing general ordinance because that one is not enforceable. So it hasn't been applied to any events. And then just to, I guess, expand on one of Shad's answers, the special events ordinance is not enforceable in incorporated municipalities, so it doesn't apply countywide either. That probably wasn't helpful to anyone, but I just had to say it.
For the county-wide general.
Correct.
That wouldn't be enforceable in incorporated communities either?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Because they would presumably have their own ordinances if they wanted to regulate that?
Correct.
Got it.
And if they don't have their own ordinance, that's also them deciding that they didn't want an ordinance.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Shad? Okay. The open house, go ahead. Yep.
So say I'm in a township that has my own ordinance, and Marathon County, if they're providing traffic control or whatever, would potentially have three different rule sets. As far as countywide, you could have the town doing it, or you could have the zone, well, it's county zoning, the general ordinance, or the town. So we could be operating underneath three different rule sets for special events.
So if it's a county, or if it's a town that participates in county zoning, it would fall under the one we're talking about here for Chapter 17. And potentially, once the task force comes up with a countywide ordinance, it may have implications on that as well. If you are in a non-county zone town, this Chapter 17 ordinance wouldn't apply to that. They would be whether that township has their own ordinance or the countywide, or the unincorporated county area ordinance. So potentially you could have two, but it would be, essentially how ours is set up is it would essentially tag team off each other. So if, for example, if Chapter 17, depending on it, it's kind of hard when we don't know exactly the criteria of the zoning. Is it Chapter 2, was it? Or 12? 12. So the Chapter 12 ordinance hasn't been essentially, for lack of a better term, legalized yet. It's hard to tell exactly how those two would play off each other. And that's something that we can look at once that gets figured out. We can, whether ours needs to be adjusted or whatnot, we can look at that then, I think.
Well, I mean, that's also, I think, one of the main intents of the task force is, too, to your credit, bringing that up as far as them hammering out and how these two are going to coexist.
And I think it's very possible, depending on what that hammers out, we would have to come back and update ours accordingly.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but for right now, I think they're probably a year or more away from that, Mike. I don't know, any ideas, any guesses? No.
Yeah.
Shrug.
I guess we don't know when
Yep.
that's going to be updated. So.
Okay. So as Overbeck.
Just the reason I'm asking this is I'm involved with the Taste and Glow as a board member, and that's one of the larger events, and it's in a town that has their own regulations, but this is coming up, so we're gonna have to figure out exactly what goes on with some of this. So it's complicated.
Sure. Chair Gibbs.
And I haven't been sworn in either, so I don't know if I need to be.
I guess, do you wish to offer testimony?
Well, I was going to just add.
No,
a little-
if you're gonna speak, I'm gonna swear you in.
Pardon me.
So, okay, well, you're also not staff, so if you wanted to add something, I'd swear you in later.
You can
For,
just swear me in now, that's fine.
I'm gonna follow the script, so if you wanna offer testimony, you're gonna have to be sworn in later.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, the only thing I was.
No,
Oh,
put the mic down. This is not a power trip either. This is just, I want to do this right. I have one more thing to add here. Did anybody show up to the open house?
Nobody specifically showed up to the open house. We were contacted by the town of Gunther the day after. They weren't able to make it due to vehicle trouble.
Okay.
They didn't have any comments for changes or anything. It was more like clarification. For example, they were wondering how the special events would affect wedding barns as a business, if it was an established business already.
Sure.
In a sense, if it's an established business, it would have zero effect on them.
Okay.
But if somebody had a property that was in a zoning district that allowed for these temporary events, and it was a temporary event, a one-time thing or something like that, it would apply to it.
Okay. How many comments, you don't have to necessarily give me an exact number, but how many comments outside of let me go back. So nobody showed up to the open house, correct? Okay. How many comments outside of the open house, and doesn't have to be an exact number, but 10, less than 20, how many comments did we receive from towns?
Overall, less than 10.
Okay. Okay. Well, they were provided ample opportunities to be engaged. So, okay. All right. Anything else for staff? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the ordinance revision, please identify yourself at this time. Call again. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone petition, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing, hearing none. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone, or sorry, not rezone, ordinance revisions, please identify yourself this time. I'll call one more time. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone, or ordinance revisions, please identify yourself at this time. Okay, anybody wishing to speak as interested, please identify yourself this time. Chair Gibbs, did you have something to add?
I was just going to
Name and-
mention that,
name and-
when we talk.
Name and address?
Name and address, my name is Kurt Gibbs. Address is 136301 4 Mile Road, Marathon, Wisconsin.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to add that when we do formulate that task force, there's going to have to be multiple departments involved in that, because you're going to have health department involved, you're going to have public safety involved, and so it's going to be comprehensive when we actually start to rewrite that and write that effectively so that it is the intent of the board. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I doubt anybody has any questions for the chair, so. Seeing and hearing none. Okay. Anybody wishing to offer testimony for the ordinance revisions for 5A3? Anybody else is interested, please identify yourself at this time. Last call, anybody wishing to speak as interested? Okay. If no one else wishes to testify for these revisions, I am now declaring the public hearing on 5A3, public hearing on text amendment changes to the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 15, Private Sewage System, Chapter 17, Zoning Code, and Chapter 18, Land Division, Survey Regulations. Now closed. Committee will now deliberate the application, apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. Based on the work that staff has done, the engagement with the towns, and the testimony that we've collected today, I believe a motion to recommend approval would be in order. Supervisor Ritter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to approve the changes to the 2023 text amendments to the Marathon County General Code of Ordinances, Chapters 15, 17, and 18.
Okay. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Seefeld. Any further discussion? Lori, did you? Nope. Oh, okay. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to, thank you, staff. Moving on to B, review and possible recommendations to the County Board for its consideration. Town zoning changes pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 60.62 sub 3. We have none. C, review and possible recommendations to the County Board for its consideration. 1, resolution for use of environmental impact funds to fund repair and replacement of aerators at the Big O Plain. Where are we starting with?
We're going to invite Kirsty Heidenreich, our county conservationist, as well as some representatives from DNR, WVIC, and BEPCO up here. So just give us a minute to.
You guys going to have enough room up there?
We're going to switch out.
Okay.
So they're going to give you a presentation on the aerators. So.
Sounds good.
So for these, we just use up in the down arrow for these then. So maybe Al and Lucas can sit over here, and then, sorry, it's a little tight quarters up here, isn't it? Yeah, and then there's room over there for you guys. You can just sit down in a chair. Yes, please.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, so if you guys are sitting down. So I'll do a brief introduction and then I'll step all the way back here and then sit in your spots when you guys come up. And you have to get a little bit closer. Is it okay if I go ahead and start, Lori?
Don't let anybody else. Yeah. Well, yeah, are you ready, Kirsty?
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you
sorry,
are.
go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead, yeah.
Okay, great. Looks like we are down one monitor, but the good news is the folks online can see because they're connected to this. And you guys do have full page handouts, so hopefully that allows you to see some of what we're talking about together until they get that fixed. So good afternoon, everyone. You all know me, I'm Kirsty Heidenreich with CPZ, and I'm joined today by some of my wonderful colleagues who are part of a partnership that has existed for years that we're going to talk to you about today. It's a partnership that exists for the Big O Plain. So we had talked about this briefly weeks or months ago. We've kind of touched on it in the past, but we spend a lot of our time in the conservation department working on the Big O Plain. I've talked to you in the past about the Fenwood Creek watershed. That is a smaller watershed within the Big O Plain watershed. And so if you look on the first map in your packet, you can see that the Big O Plain is the watershed highlighted in green on the map. So anything that is occurring on the land in that green area eventually drains via multiple different ways of transport, streams and rivers, to get down into the Big O Plain Reservoir, which leads into Lake Dubay and the Wisconsin River. And so since we do have some committee members that may not be as familiar with some of the history of the Big O Plain and Marathon County's role with that history, I'm very glad that we have some of our partners here today to talk about that. So a couple of us will give just a brief presentation here to provide some history, and then we would love to have a little bit of a conversation with you all as well today in a question and answer session when we wrap up as well. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleagues at the DNR, and you guys can introduce yourself. And they're just going to give a little bit of an introduction to the beautiful fishery that exists in the Big O Plain.
Hi, I'm Lucas Koenig. I'm the fisheries biologist for Marathon and Portage County with the DNR. Right here is Al Niebuhr. He's my supervisor. So I'm going to give you a pretty cool introduction here on the fishery. It's an incredible fishery and kind of the importance of the fishery locally in this area. And honestly, we're really lucky to have it. So the first whole bunch of slides are going to just be some pictures. This is DNR crews out there during one of our electrofishing surveys. It's a huge cooperative effort. A lot of people get together to help out survey this body of water. Just some of the fish that we see, the quality of fish on the O Plain. Just an amazing fishery. It grows some pretty impressive fish. I'll just kind of go through these pictures here. A lot of big pike out there. Some muskies are out there as well. And then, of course, everyone knows the walleye fishery out there is a phenomenal walleye fishery. Part of what the DNR and WVIC work together on is monitoring the dissolved oxygen levels in the water. I'm sure Ben will talk about that later. And then just going into some of the history of some of the fish surveys that were done. There was a comprehensive survey done in 2003 before some of the fish kills that happened in 2009 and 2013. The fish composition was pretty dominated by walleye at the time. And then in our next comprehensive survey in 2017, it kind of switched, and there was a, hold on one second here. The relative abundance of crappie from 2003 to 2017 increased over 800% in that time frame. It's still dominated by walleye, but crappies are a really close second and provide a very popular fishery. Going into the walleye, some of the data. What we do is we do mark recapture surveys out there, and we can use that to calculate the abundance of or population estimate for walleye. And in 2017, we estimated about 25,000 walleyes were in the O Plain at that time. And compared to the 2003 estimate, the population estimate was down a little bit. But looking at the size structure of the fish that are out there, a lot of those fish were larger fish in 2017. And so overall, the biomass in 2017 of the walleye fishery was much higher than what it was in 2003, even though there was more fish out there in 2003. Another thing to note, during our spring pike netting surveys, I went into our database statewide and I downloaded every single pike net survey since 2010 that's been done throughout the entire state. And the pike net survey that was done on the O Plain in 2017, the number or the percent of 20-inch walleyes and larger on the O Plain that year ranked 7th in the state since 2010. So that survey is done all throughout the state. It's very impressive. Also, looking at the amount of fish per acre, there's approximately 3.3 walleyes per acre of adult walleyes, which is very good numbers, and that's pretty much what you want to see for a healthy fishery. And on top of that, there was 0.4 walleyes that were at least 20 inches or bigger per acre in the system at that time as well, that were estimated. And that's the highest, 0.4 walleyes per acre that are 20 inches or bigger is the highest that we've found in all of our history of surveying the Big O Plain. Moving on, this is kind of what I just touched on briefly before. The trend in walleye density is down from 2003. However, the biomass is up, and that's because of those bigger fish that are currently in the system. This is kind of a trend data from spring electrofishing. We go out and during the walleye spawn, we'll electrofish the shoreline. As you can see, the most recent surveys from 2014 to 2017, the walleye population's trending upward, which is a good sign. Moving on to the northern pike, this is kind of where it gets really cool in my opinion. I did the same thing with the pike data. I downloaded all the pike netting survey data from 2010 on throughout the entire state of Wisconsin. And the size structure of northern pike on the O Plain ranked #1 in the entire state. Extremely impressive. Out of 591 northern pike captured that were greater than or equal to 14 inches, 361 of those, or 61%, were 28 inches or bigger. And 92 of those, or 16%, were 34 inches or bigger. 47 of those, or 8%, were 40 inches or bigger, which is considered trophy in many people's eyes. And then 2, or 0.34%, were 44 inches or bigger. And this is the only survey out of the only spring pike netting survey in the entire state of Wisconsin since 2010 that has captured any pike at all over 44 inches, which is, it's awesome. And kind of to wrap things up here, our next survey is scheduled for 2024, so we'll be out there next spring. We'll be doing the same. We'll calculate population estimates for walleye and pike and see how that's trending. I put in a request for funding to do a creel survey. I don't know if many of you make it out there, but if you drive past some of the boat launches this winter, they're absolutely packed with vehicles, and there's a lot of people out there this year. gets a lot of fishing pressure, and the last creel survey that was done was in 2003. And in January alone, they estimated approximately 186,000 angling hours were spent out there by people fishing. So I think it's time, hopefully we can get funding for that, to also do a creel survey the same year we're out there doing our comprehensive fishery survey. So it's an awesome fishery, and it's definitely a rare fishery, and I think we're very lucky to have that here locally. So that's all I got. I don't know if Al wants to add anything.
Just to echo what Lucas is saying, it's a fishery that's second to none. I've worked in the fisheries program here for 32 years and worked in all over the state. And I remember I did a survey out there with our crew for one day, and I handled more large northern pike in that one day than I handled in my entire career. So it tells you something there. So it's a neat fishery. It gets a lot of love, a lot of attention. Like Lucas said, if you get a chance, just drive around the impoundment and take a look right now during the winter. It's just amazing how much pressure we're seeing out there as far as fishing effort. And it's a destination location. This is kind of cool. If you ever get a chance and look at, there's some TV shows like, In-Depth Outdoors, and I think Earl Gillespie has a fishing show, and they've actually done some film shots out there on the Big Old Plain. Actually, just recently, I think it was a couple weeks ago, they did one.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. So it gets a lot of attention even statewide. So a very neat resource for the Marathon County folks, but also for the entire state.
So my name is Ben Niffenegger. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Affairs with Wisconsin Valley Improvement Company. And we manage and operate the dam that creates the Eau Plaine Reservoir. As part of our operations, we're actually regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so we have a whole slew of our own independent fish and wildlife management plans, land management plans, recreational plans, where we do a lot of data collection and have been for decades. And one of the unique data collection efforts we go through every 7 years is actually monitoring all the recreational use on the Eau Plaine. So at any public recreational access point, every 7 years, for an entire season, we'll go out and do vehicle counts, shore fishermen counts, boats with boat trailers. And so what I have this graphic here just showing from 2021, our last count, and this is just the open water season, so just the summer season. We're looking at over 50,000 plus unique primarily boaters and fishermen. This doesn't take into consideration all of the homes around the Eau Plaine and all of the fishermen that can launch their boats from home. And to Lucas and Al's point, it also doesn't take into consideration any of the wintertime use or ice fishing. So just open season, significant amount of visitors there, broken down by the different landings. Jamie Polly with the Parks Department was happy to provide us some revenue numbers as well. The Big Old Plaine County Park is by far the most heavily used county park and brings in almost or over $166,000 in 2022 revenue. So again, a lot of the visitor counts I had mentioned before were actually on-water visitors. It doesn't even factor in all of the campers, bikers, horseback riding, trails, and other recreation that occurs around the Eau Plaine. And so it's kind of because of this unique resource that we have here. The aerator history has always been a partnership between Marathon County, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, WVIC, and then also the Big Old Plaine Citizens Organization. And the original, kind of the origination of the aerator was back in 1980, and it was actually owned by the county. And so there was a recognition of the importance of the Eau Plaine to the community. And so a fundraising effort occurred back then. And you can see it was really a collaboration between this partnership group. And then that really extended with partnering with maintenance, partnering with operating costs over the years through 2006 when the county signed a lease agreement with the DNR. Moving on to 2008, that's where Marathon County ran into some budgetary cuts and budgetary issues and indicated that they would no longer be operating the system due to those budget cuts. WVIC likewise had been voluntarily paying all of the electrical costs for those decades, and the aeration system ultimately was deeded over to the DNR in 2008. And WVIC agreed to temporarily pay the electrical costs. In 2009, as you're going to hear about later on here in the presentation, is when there was a very large fish kill on the Eau Plaine that received a lot of attention. And that's when the task force was actually formed, a whole slew of county, state agencies, local groups, a lot of people part of this task force implemented a short-term aeration plan and realized the aerator needed some upgrades at that time just to be functional. And so another fundraising effort occurred in 2010. This was not for a complete overhaul of the system. It was just for some upgrades to plumbing and piping. And again, everyone pitched in with a variety of in-kind services, donations between Marathon County, DNR, WVIC, and the citizens group, Big Eau Plaine. There is a correction on the slides I noticed here. I have indicated 2017 there was an MOA that was signed between the parties. That was signed in 2012 and lasted 5 years. And then there was not an MOA signed since then. We recently have initiated discussions realizing there is a need for some upgrades at the Eau Plaine. And so the parties have a draft MOA now that is in draft form. And so just to give you all kind of an idea of how much publicity that fish kill in 2009 received, here's just a clipping from the Twin Cities Pioneer Press. So you had Midwestern newspapers that were picking up on this. You also had the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, certainly lots of local TV, radio stations as well. And I think I'll turn things over to Christy here for a short PBS special that was done as well.
So this is a very brief video, just a quick 5-minute video. We wanted to show you all a video that so accurately encapsulates the effect of the fish kill on our local communities and on residents that live along the Big Eau Plaine. The sound isn't working with me here. It's muted on the keyboard.
To be honest with you, I'm gonna close this one. Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, you're good. I'm wondering why it's doing this, because we tested it. One sec. I don't think so. Okay, let's try this.
Washing up on.
There we go.
Okay. Yay. Great job, guys. Thank you.
The Wisconsin fishing opener is less than a month away, but there's a catch for anglers on the Big Eau Plaine Reservoir. Up to 80% of the fish have died this spring and are washing up on shore. The 6,000-acre reservoir near the Wisconsin River in Marathon County is lined with homes, bait shops, campgrounds, and now thousands of dead fish. In Wisconsin reporter Art Hackett shows you who's catching the blame near Mosinee.
This reservoir was created by damming the Big Eau Plaine River. Pepe Gonzalez and Tim Garrigan fish in the Big Eau Plaine's waters, but not usually with sticks.
One of the top walleye fisheries around.
Both have been walking the shorelines, counting the lake's losses.
I think I've counted 20-some walleyes, probably over 24 inches. A lot of walleyes under that size, a lot of crappies the size of your hand. I mean, crappies are everywhere. Bullheads, everything from bullheads to northerns. There's some nice northerns, 40 plus northerns.
And muskies?
Muskies too. They keep on blowing in like crazy that there's one that size, if not a little bigger.
Debbie and I have gone down to look at the water. We've never seen anything as substantial as this, where they're just outlining the shorelines. This is bad.
For businesses near the lake, like the Winter Haven Tavern, it's another economic snag.
When the fish are biting, and we have a lot of fishermen stop for lunches and this and that, and families come down and then they come in here and have something to eat, and it's going to hurt, not substantially, but it's going to be a deficit there. You know, no matter what, you're always going to have a fish kill through the winter. It always happens. There's nothing you can do about it. But we've never seen anything like this. This is a catastrophe. It's unbelievable.
There are almost as many theories explaining the fish kill as, well, there are dead fish. Among them, farm runoff, water management practices, and drought. Northern Wisconsin has been in a drought for 5 years. Boat ramps barely reach their destination. 6 feet of riprap stretches above the water line. DNR fish biologist Tom Moronic says this beach we are standing on is normally submerged. And not long ago, things were even worse.
Originally, this winter, this reservoir was down 17 feet below full pool.
But Moronic says it's not just that the water was low. The Big O Plain was dead, and so were an estimated 80% of the fish in it.
A lot of fish died. We're not sure exactly how many at this point. Pretty good portion of the fish that would be down in this lower end of the reservoir probably died because there was really no oxygen down here.
Moronic says the DNR thought they had the problem under control after a series of fish kills in the 1970s. In 1982, the Wisconsin Valley Improvement Corporation installed this aeration system. If a pool of oxygen-starved water was discovered, it could be drawn through the aeration field, bubbling life-giving oxygen back into it. Over the winter, says Moronic, the entire lake went bad.
According to some reports now from their studies or their monitoring, we're seeing low oxygen starting down below the aeration system even. So that's what we mean when we say, pretty much the entire reservoir is turning bad about at the same time. And the aeration system was not designed to handle that, and it was never meant to handle that.
Tom Meyer of the DNR's Mead Wildlife Center is in charge of the aeration system.
Well, this year we went into the winter probably the lowest that I've seen it in 26 years of being here. We were almost 18 feet low. So that happened. We froze up early. There is high oxygen demand in the flowage continually now because of organic material that is built up on the bottom sediments. So the minute it ices over, you start to lose oxygen.
Meyer says the aeration system is worn out and doesn't do the job it once did. Tim Garrigan and others worry the problem's been allowed to grow too big for too long.
But let's pretend we're going to have a 15-year drought. Are we just going to kill the fish until there's nothing left? I mean, there's 80% of them are dead now. Do we just kill off the next 20% next year? I mean, we have no plan in effect.
Actually, the DNR says it does have a plan to figure out what's causing big problems on the Big O Plain.
And that's where In Wisconsin reporter Art Hackett picks up this story next week. And there's no easy solution to the problem.
If there's problems with fish kills here on the O Plain, if we try to save water here, some other reservoir is going to suffer. So it's a complex system.
Next Thursday on In Wisconsin, we explore the big picture problems plaguing the Big O Plain and how that could impact the Wisconsin River.
All right, thank you for watching that with us. Obviously very concerning, and you can see a lot of the emotions that the folks in the video portrayed, because it is very emotional to see our resources, our cherished resources, going through these types of events that truly do devastate a local area and then also impact things on a much larger scale than that as well. So we know that we have to take a look back at history to decide how we are going to move forward from here. So these are the kind of pictures that we are trying to prevent from ever seeing again in Marathon County. We have heard what a treasure of a fishery we have here, and so we want to do what we can to protect it. This is actually a quote that was in one of those newspapers years ago, and it was by John Kennedy from the Big O Plain Citizens Organization, who's here with us today. Truly unbelievable, the types of quotes that I read while looking back through some of these historical newspapers. And not only did it affect the fishery, but it even affected Marathon County's revenue during this time period as well. So on the bottom of the slide, you can see that Marathon County Parks, they do take in a significant amount of boat revenue per year at each of the boat launch locations. In 2007, they were receiving over $6,200 a year on the Big O Plain. And then after the fish kill, they didn't even hit $1,000 that year, because who's going to want to go visit a resource looking like that, right? And as Tom Moronic from the DNR had stated in the video, they do believe that about 80% of the fish had died during this event. And I'll let Ben continue to talk a little bit about the history of these type of events on the Big O Plain.
So unfortunately, fish kills are not, have been going on for a long time out at the O Plain. And so this graphic just shows some of the records that the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and WVIC had collected over the years. And you could see, it varies quite a bit. Sometimes we're able to go 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes a couple decades. And so a lot of this is driven because of kind of unforeseen circumstances, whether that's weather-related, precipitation-related, runoff events. There's a lot that contributes to these, and there's a lot of uncertainty where it's really difficult to predict. And so I think a good overview and history on the aerators was just to have something operational so that when those unforeseen events come up in a particular winter, that at least there's something we can do. Now, it doesn't fix all of the potential issues. When fully operational, the aeration system will open up about 30 to 60 acres of open water. So that is a significant size aeration system. However, the reservoir system as a whole is 6,000 to 7,000 acres. So it does provide a limited refuge, but it's the most that we've been able to do thus far. So here's an aerial photo, kind of just showing all of the individual holes that open up. There's 14 lines that leave the aeration building. There's 2 motors and 2 blowers that pump air out into these lines. Each line has 2 holes in it, or orifices. The oxygen goes through those holes and then gets trapped underneath the ice and eventually erodes the ice away to create these holes. And so it doesn't work like a fish tank where the oxygen isn't coming from the tubes and oxygenating the water. The goal is to open the ice up so that wind and wave action then can bring oxygen into the reservoir. And so, again, highlighting on the key partnerships, both WVIC and DNR go out in the wintertime, typically weekly when conditions are severe, or every other week to monitor dissolved oxygen. And we do that from the dam, each river mile, all the way up to Balsam Road or Spindler's Bridge, which is about 18 river miles. And so we'll put a hole in the ice and measure an oxygen profile at each mile so that we can kind of track where things are going. And then we provide these graphical representations of the oxygen to a whole variety of interested groups so that everyone can collectively kind of track conditions. And basically, if you're looking at these colored lines, this is oxygen levels in parts per million. And ideally for game fish, they really like 5 or higher. So 5 to 10 is good for our game fish. Now they could spend some time down at a 3 level or a 2 or even a 1 to feed, but they really don't want to be in those conditions very long. And what we typically see on most winters, and this is early January, you can see the upper portion of the water column is pretty well oxygenated, but all of that organic matter on the bottom of the reservoir slowly starts to break down as soon as ice goes on. So we had a very early ice on this year, which was concerning, but we had a lot of rain and precip in November, which has brought in higher flows to kind of help flush things through the reservoir. So we're kind of in, I would say, an above average year for oxygen conditions at this time. But in most years, if you look at the next slide, you can see as we go along into March, 2019 was the last year where we saw really bad oxygen depletion. You can recall all of the colored lines that we had shown in January. Each week that was getting worse and worse. And so we started the aerator up in early February to try to provide that limited refuge. And by mid-March, the only measurable oxygen was really at the aeration system or just downstream. indicated here with a couple of 2s and 3s, or way up in the river channel where there's just a lot less room for fish to move around, a lot less volume of water.
So as you've already heard this afternoon, everyone working together in this partnership is what makes it work. And so one of the reasons we're talking to you today is because we do believe that Marathon County has the potential to distribute additional capital to fix or replace part of the aerators that need replacement. And we believe that's made possible through the Environmental Impact Fund. Now, even though we can potentially provide that capital, it is our partners who bring the many, many in-kind hours to do all of the maintenance, all of the check-ins, collect all of the data, and keep a watchful eye on the situation. So once the machines are up and running, it is the partners who keep them going. One thing that we wanted to share briefly with you is a result of the fish kill. After 2009, there was a group of people that got together saying this cannot happen again. We need to make sure it does not happen again. And so in order to do that, we are going to create a strategic plan to lay out how are we each going to play a part in making sure we are doing a better job in the future. And that was called Strategies for Reducing Fish Kills in the Big O Plain Reservoir. And that was presented before this committee. The county was just a piece of the puzzle in that plan. There were dozens and dozens of partners from around the state and central Wisconsin. It was published in 2017. And one of the key aspects of the plan stated that we need to develop, engage, and sustain partnerships necessary to implement this plan for reducing fish kills in the Big O Plain. So even then, we knew that one of the key results of these discussions are that Marathon County alone cannot save the Big O Plain. The DNR alone cannot save the Big O Plain. WVIC alone cannot keep the aerators running. It has to be all of us coming together, each bringing something to the table to get the job done. We also knew that we needed a greater understanding of the economic impacts of the Big O Plain to the economy in central Wisconsin. We've talked about this very loosely, but it is a huge impact to central Wisconsin and its economy. UWSP, who played a pivotal role in helping to write this plan, they did do a survey to all the shoreline landowners who lived along the Big O Plain Reservoir. And one of the key questions they asked is, where are we all going to agree with the statement here? And every single survey respondent agreed that local funding to revitalize the lake is a great investment in our future. So these are your Marathon County constituents, your taxpayers that are saying, please use the funds that you have to invest in this wonderful resource that we have. They also understood that the reputation of the fishery is perceived to be damaged when these fish kills occur. So they knew that every single time there's either a large or a minor fish kill, that will economically impact our area in years following. The respondents of the survey also said that they would typically participate in at least three or four different activities out of the 7 reservoir activities listed. And they had said that they were spending an average of $1,800 per household for these recreational activities. So just these shoreline landowners alone were spending combined $225,000 a year. There's 123 survey respondents. These are just the people living on the lake, not the hundreds and thousands of people that are coming to also spend money on our lake. We talk a lot in these committee meetings about wanting to be the healthiest county, the safest county, everything like that. I learned today we can also add that we have the biggest northern pike in Marathon County. So the healthiest, safest, most prosperous, and we have the biggest pike. We'll just add that tagline on. But one of our goals that we're supposed to be accomplishing here in this committee is we want to protect and preserve our natural resources so that our future generations can benefit from the health and enjoyment that comes with them. And our water resources goal is to make sure we are maintaining the health of aquatic ecosystems and protecting them. So what we're proposing to you here today is accomplishing these goals in the strategic plan that we are supposed to be channeling most of our time and energy and resources to every single time we meet. We are hopeful that the strategic plan is once again reaffirmed by the county board. But again, I'm taking you back to this objective 6.3 in our strategic plan, which we've talked about with the groundwater plan. We want to protect and enhance the quality of not only our groundwater, but our surface water supplies as well. And there are several strategies that we've outlined in our strategic plan of how we're going to get there. The way we get there with this partnership is using all three of these strategies that we have listed on the slide. We want to promote infrastructure development that protects natural resources. That's what these aerators are doing. We want to identify and preserve unique regional areas for natural resource protection. That's what the Big O Plain is. The Big O Plain is a gift to this county, and it is a gift that we've been given, but we also need to protect it. And then our final strategy is to create new partnerships with agencies and organizations to further our efforts. And what you see before you here today is about half a dozen different agencies that have come together as a partnership that are willing to work with Marathon County to protect our resources. So with that, Ben is going to go a little bit into the details of what the equipment currently is like and where we need to get it to.
So the motors and the blowers that were installed in 1980 were not new. And so even though the aeration system was developed in the 80s, it was used refurbished materials. And so we actually found the original owner's manual for these cyclo blowers, and it was from 1962, I believe, was when the owner's manual was created. So none of this equipment is new. What the DNR and WVIC have really been struggling with in recent years is just perpetual oil leaks that need constant refilling every couple of days, having to physically send someone out, clean up the oil all over the concrete floor and put more oil in just to keep these things running. And so they've been repaired numerous times, looked at numerous times, and there hasn't been any easy solutions that have lasted long term. And so what we did kind of collectively as a group is looked at seeing what would it cost to potentially upgrade and replace the blower motors, or the motors, the blowers, the electrical to match the new equipment, and then also being able to monitor some of the equipment so that we're not running into issues when we happen to physically go out to the building. And that's where the estimates are ranging between $125,000 to $150,000 based on a couple of contractors and electricians that have been out and actually reviewed the building. And that's in 2023 dollars. The timeline we wanted to highlight was even right now, if funding were to be acquired and everyone were to agree, we want to move forward, it's 50 plus weeks, almost a year out for the blower motors. And so we know that we're already going to have to kind of limp along for certainly this season, and likely even if funding is acquired, the 2024 season until it can be fully operational. There may be some things we can do in the meantime to help with that, but that just kind of gives perspective on, in terms of the sense of urgency, we're looking at least 2 more seasons of kind of unknown conditions and unknown whether the system will start or keep running. It'll require a lot of work either way, but I just wanted to put that in perspective kind of for the committee, and that's all the background that I had. You want to open things up to questions?
Yeah, that was our last.
Yeah, I don't, oh, thank you. I don't, committee members, do you have any questions for Supervisor Shapinsky?
That's very nice overall presentation, quite a bit of background. Unfortunately, not as much forward-looking as I would like. What you have at the end here is something of an aspirational statement. Do you have either a plan to present, a detailed plan of here's the equipment that we want to buy, here's the equipment that's going to be replaced, and detailed down to an actual project plan with costing, or do you have a path forward to get to that? Because this is aspirational, it's great, but it's not actionable.
I'll start. Others might pipe in here. So we have been working over the past few months, being very concerned that we know that the equipment is limping along, as Ben had said. So we have been gathering estimates from multiple contractors, and we have different options available from those contractors. What we're presenting to you is the range of what we're seeing. We have so much information in terms of different quotes, different parts we can use, different options. We really want to thoroughly explore those options and also work with an engineer to make sure that we're making the best decision in terms of what contractors we're using to piece together different parts of the puzzle. The thing is, there's nothing that exists like this anywhere in Wisconsin. So we can't call up an aerator contractor and be like, can you just fix this real quick? We have to work with a separate electrical contractor and then a separate HVAC person, a separate engine person. And so it's an extremely unique situation. We know that all of the pieces that we need and what we've heard from contractors will put us at about 125 to 150,000. So we have those quotes. We know that it would be wise to expect a certain level of contingency, considering that time will march on, prices may increase, and you never know what you're going to find once you start taking apart machinery from the 1960s. And so that's why at this point we do feel very confident asking for $175,000, but we're not able to take the next step and start hiring an engineer or contractors to get into the nitty-gritty until we have funding available. Since we are groups of partnerships that come together to pay bits and pieces of what is needed for the aerators on an annual basis, we don't have a communal checkbook that we can use to start to hire some of these people and get more detailed answers. So we feel confident that the first step should be to ask the ERC for your commitment as well in this and see if you feel confident going forward, knowing that we are already working with people, but we can't provide you with the finalized plan until we first have the green light from you. Did anyone else want to add on that?
Thank you. A question I would have is, on the resolution, it says 175,000. On the fiscal impact, it says 150,000. Is that error, or is that?
That is a typo. Yes. That might have been before we fully calculated what we felt was appropriate to list for a contingency as well.
Okay, thank you. My next question, I guess, if I may, is why didn't you come last summer? Instead of, it seems like it's waiting until more to the last minute here, and that's what, just asking that question, I guess. So, thank you.
I can comment on that. I can say that this partnership has been actively meeting since this last spring. We last met in May and June. And so in that, our first goal was to also update the memorandum of understanding that had existed between all of the groups. And since there had been a bit of a lapse in regularly meeting and understanding what needed to be done, we also didn't have as good of an idea as a group of where we really needed to go next for upgrading the aerators. And so some of the urgency that has been shed to light over the past couple of months, we did not know about in the spring and the summer. So I really appreciate the work that WVIC has done to really try to nail down some contractors during a busy time of year for them and try to get some of these quotes. And I wish we could have been here in June or July, but that's just not how the chips fell this time.
Supervisor Shapinsky.
So the $175,000 number, is that Marathon County's portion, or is that the entire bill? What is the other organizations putting on the table?
Mm-hmm. That is the ask from the Environmental Impact Fund for Marathon County to approve. I'll let my partners comment a little bit on some of the not only in-kind hours that they provide, but also the other bills that they pay, because they can more accurately describe that. So you can talk up here or wherever.
Yeah, I think we've been tracking kind of the costs ever since 1980s, and not extremely detailed, but there's been significant costs from both DNR and WVIC over the years. Coming up to present day, we're looking at certainly the electrical costs to operate this throughout the season. That can range quite a bit depending on how long it's run, but it could be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a season just in electrical costs. Every time we go out weekly to monitor to see whether or not the aeration system's needed, it's about $1,000 of water quality laboratory costs for us to collect phosphorus samples, biological oxygen demand, plus at least one WVIC staff and one DNR staff for typically an 8 to 10 hour day. And that's weekly every year and has been occurring for decades. This data has been collected so that we can make kind of informed decisions on operations. So it's really that ongoing kind of maintenance and operations costs have been handled 100% between DNR and WVIC really since Marathon County kind of deeded the system over to the DNR. It's just been collective on our part. Marathon County has provided some electrical costs, I think a $500 check each year, for a few days of operation. So.
Yeah, as far as the department's, I guess, commitment, as far as what we've been committing for funding, we do have an annual budget that we use to fund assistance with the WVIC for the dissolved oxygen monitoring. We also are the primary people that are responsible for when the aerator is operated, there's like a barrier fence that has to be constructed. And so we've been maintaining that barrier fence. We do also place that when we fire up the aerator, and that's a considerable amount of effort to do that. And then I think the biggest thing that we're working on lately that I think maybe you should be aware of is we are working on a major DPS project, a capital development project to solidify our access into the aerator building. When, without going into a great amount of detail, when that came back to the department, the access going in there, it actually crosses from a town road over private land that we only had a verbal approval to go across. And so we're working on trying to get an easement, and it's been very difficult because it's several landowners, a trust, and you can imagine it's difficult to secure that easement. So we do have, if the easement doesn't work, and we're still working on it right now, but if it doesn't work out, we have a $200,000 plus road project that we're going to actually start up this coming fall. It's been funded by the department. We have the funds ready to go. We're just right now just seeing if we can maybe get that easement. And then, like I said, we're working on that right now. If we do get the easement, we're still going to use some of those funds to actually make improvements to our access going in there, improving the road that goes in from the town road, the existing access, and also creating some additional parking areas and things for equipment and things like that. So, that's probably going to be like, if we scale it down, it's like a $60,000 commitment. So there's a lot of funds that the DNR is putting on the table too.
Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you for the great presentation, and thank you for the partnership that we have here. Maintaining an asset like this in the county is significant. A couple of questions that I have: has the MOU been updated then? And do we understand, who's going to be responsible for operating the equipment, maintaining the equipment, insuring the equipment, that type of thing? And then another question for Corp Counsel would be this, and that is, would we have to go out to RFP for this equipment, seeing how it is above the threshold for acquisition?
My answer is shorter, so yes.
Yes, so we have had many meetings since the spring, summer, fall to talk about the MOU or MOA related to each person's role in the partnership. But we do have an updated version. We had Mike review it quickly, but we wanted to wait to sign it to see what would come of this, just, to very clearly outline who is doing what. But everything is updated and ready to go, and we all feel really good about where that MOA is sitting right now.
Well, again, thank you for the presentation, and I intend on supporting the funding for this project. I do have one question, because I'm looking at, one second. There's a document called Strategies for Reducing Fish Kills in the Big Old Plain Reservoir, and it talks about the number of groups that have partnered with the Old Plain to provide all these services. I'm curious, what are Taylor and Clark doing?
Yeah, so I did reference that plan in our presentation because
Yep.
that is such a great plan. So Taylor and Clark, our conservation department works with them on a lot of the bigger grants we get for the Big O Plain. They continue to be a supporter of those grants. And we do work with them on, let me just bring up the map too so we can kind of show everyone where their part of the watershed lies. They continue to provide support for agronomic practices and working with landowners that own land both in Marathon County or Taylor Clark County. So you can see where part of that the far northwest part is in Taylor, and then just west of Abbotsford and Colby, that's over in Clark. And so not actively involved in things like this where we're getting so far into the center part of the county, but I would still say key partners in the outline or the upland parts of the Big Old Plain watershed.
Sure, and I mean, the water body exists entirely within Marathon County, so I'm not in any way suggesting that Clark and Taylor have a role to play in this here today. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just curious what they offer to the partnership that with the Big Old Plain. Okay. Supervisor Overbeck.
Just one question. I guess what types of, engineering initiatives are being looked at to take this into the future as far as sustainability or keeping this system going beyond what was in the 1960s?
Yeah, I think our goal here as a group was just to see if there was some buy-in and some support from the committee before we start going down that route. But I think at least having an engineer provide an independent assessment of what the contractors have suggested for potential changes is certainly warranted. And I think as a group, we all realize that was an important step moving forward so that it's a good use of funds. So we don't have any direct answers now, but that's something collectively we wanted to bounce around amongst ourselves, what type of engineering firm to actually go out to do an initial review. We're not looking at necessarily a complete overhaul of the system. The Army Corps of Engineers helped with this design back in 2010 with kind of the last update. DNR and WVIC worked with the Army Corps to come up with how many pounds per square inch of pressure would be needed to fill the lines and create that. This would just be a direct replacement of what's out there now, not an expansion or redesign, because then I think we're looking at numbers in a whole different ballpark. This is just replacing the existing setup.
Supervisor Stravinsky.
So you've got a lot of information on potential direct equipment replacement, although it's not outlined as completely as it might be. Have you had any discussions with engineering firms about doing some engineering studies to either improve the system, take the system into the future, other things that we might do? Because what we've seen here is that, and this is no criticism, I mean, we have all sorts of factors that impact the Old Plain far beyond the ability of the aeration system. The aeration system is one small part that we're trying to do to impact drought levels, rainfall levels, everything else. But have you got any dollars on engineering studies, any range?
Not specific to the...
Oops, I don't think it's on.
Sorry, not specific to the aeration system. There's been
dozens of environmental related studies, done by a whole host of different entities over the decades. I think the Eau Plaine is probably the most studied reservoir we have in our entire fleet of reservoirs, which WVIC manages 21, 5 man-mades that are somewhat comparable to the Eau Plaine. So in terms of a sound understanding of the root causes and problems, the amount of organic material coming in, how that process works, that I think is well understood and documented. But to your, I think, question, an engineer hasn't looked at the actual aeration system itself, since 2010 with the Army Corps of Engineers. There's ongoing studies that DNR, WVIC, and others are looking at to, continually understand how fish move throughout the system, but those are still pending.
Mm-hmm. And I can confidently say I actually know how to take it into the future. Regenerative agriculture, soil health, working with farmers on infiltration, increasing our enforcement, all of these things. We don't have to invest in infrastructure to feed fish oxygen if we fix what's happening in the watershed on the land. And that's why I asked Marathon County for $3 million in ARPA funds to try to reward the farmers that are already doing this in things like the Fenwood Creek watershed. We've seen farmers go from allowing 5 pounds an acre of phosphorus to leave their fields down to 1 pound an acre. Just as a reminder, even 1 pound of phosphorus can produce 500 pounds of algae. So when we have thousands of pounds of phosphorus entering our watershed and into the Big Eau Plaine reservoir, that is what is depleting our oxygen. So looking into the future, we don't get more oxygen, we fix what's happening on the land. And I look forward to working with you all on that because we have lots of ideas and I'm really excited with some of the support we've already seen from you guys already. But that's the future, not investing in infrastructure, it's investing on what's happening upland in the watershed.
Okay, any other questions? And this might have been touched on already, and it's touched on, I think, a little bit on that last slide, but if the county were to commit to something like this, which, we're very blessed in this county that we have an opportunity to do so without it having a direct impact on our tax bills, because we have these funds set aside for environmental purposes. I view this project more as possibly a helping hand, maybe to encourage something in the future to come from this, to hopefully make this not necessarily more sustainable, but definitely more feasible. That this changes and other initiatives can be made over time. Not that the mission of this is wrong at all. I totally understand that. But the thing that I, of course, have concerns over is that if we provide this support, and I believe as other supervisors have mentioned, well, if it's $125,000 here, but in 6 to 8 years, could there possibly be something else? And if we only have limited funds in this account, I start to worry about what happens then? And I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not saying that we need to worry about something that hasn't happened yet, but I think it's something that all the partners need to start considering, which is if the support is provided now, where will the support come from ultimately in the future? And I think we can all agree on that. So, like I said, I still support this 100%. I just don't want to give off the impression that in 6 to 8 years, if something were to happen, more replacements were to be made, that these groups can come back and get the same sort of support, because we might have even more difficulties then. But like I said, I still want to support this today. So, anything else from the committee? If not, I believe a motion to approve would be in order. Supervisor Ritter.
I will make a motion to approve the resolution for the use of environmental impact funds to fund repair and replacement of aerators at the Big Eau Plaine.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Overbeck. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming and presenting to this group. We look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you for your support.
All right. Up next, recommendations of adoption of the West Side Master Plan. We've got kind of a heavy second half of this agenda. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Okay? Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 5:14.